Hello everyone, welcome to our Pecha Kucha of the Laramie Project by Moises Kaufman and the members of the Tectonic Theater Project.
If you are unfamiliar with the show, the Laramie Project was based off of the true and tragic story of Matthew Shepard in Laramie, Wyoming. It is a story of one of the most horrific cases of a hate crime in the United States and caught the attention of the entire world. It ignited the fire that would push activism and legislation forward to finally take action.
The story took place in a small town called Laramie, Wyoming. A rather small town that, if it were not for the events that unfolded, most of us would not even recognize the name. The town is described as quiet, uneventful, a good place to live, and with good people.
Matthew Shepard was a 21-year-old gay student at the University of Wyoming. He was born on December 1st, 1976, in Casper, Wyoming. On the night of October 6, 1998, he was beaten by two men, Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson. He was tied to a fence, robbed, tortured, and left to die. After being rescued, he stayed in a coma for 4 days and died on October 12th.
Moises Kaufman was born on November 21st in 1963 in Caracas, Venezuela. He was born to Orthodox Jewish parents and attended a Jewish religious school. During trips to New York City, he was exposed to a broader culture and began to develop his ideals. He moved to New York in 1987. He then established the Tectonic Theater Project with his partner 4 years later.
When writing the play, Moises Kaufman and the Tectonic Theater Company created the technique called moment work. Kaufman created this method in order to analyze theater from a structureless perspective. Therefore, as he states, there are no scenes in this play, but moments. A moment does not necessarily mean a change in setting or the entrance and exit of characters, but a simple unit of theatrical time.
I personally was skeptical at first as to how this would be a more effective method of storytelling. However, to my surprise, I read the play and it was a seamless transition of themes and events. There didn't seem to be any use for the scene structure that is found in very traditional plays.
There are many people interviewed throughout the course of this play. Each person plays a different role in guiding the story along, being that there are so many different faces and point of views to hear when it comes to the death of Matthew Shepard. The main person one thinks about concerning this tragic story is Matthew Shepard. However, as the play unfolds, so many more characters are introduced.
All actors that portray the workers at the theater company then transform into the people of Laramie who are being interviewed. All costume changes are done on stage so as to create fluidity and give the illusion of connection between every single person. People like Rebecca Hilliker, Jedediah Schultz, Doc O'Connor, Catherine Connolly, Mr. Meade Johnson, and Father Schmidt were some of the many locals that were interviewed.
In the first act, the audience is told that the play is made up of interviews from real people. Characters are introduced, and the audience learns about the town and its history, which is pretty plain. Detective Sergeant Hinch is interviewed, followed by Eileen Engine, Doc O'Connor, and Philip Du Bois. Laramie is repeatedly called a good place to live, despite the fact that reporters came after Matthew Shepard's death.
This is followed up by journal entries in which the members of the company had written based on their first impressions of the idea to go into Laramie to conduct these interviews. Andy Paris, Stephen Belbert, Amanda Gronage, and Moises Kaufman all agreed to work together and take extreme precaution by always going in pairs and carrying a cell phone.
The Tectonic Theater members then interviewed Aaron Kreefels, who was riding his bike when he fell, got up, looked around, and saw something lying beside a fence. It took him a while to realize that it was the body of Matthew Shepard. Matthew had been laying there alone for 18 hours, tied to a fence, with a head wound and missing shoes. Aaron quickly ran to call the police.
Reggie Flutie was the first policewoman on the scene. She tried to stop the bleeding and cut him free from the fence. She called the paramedics who brought Matthew to the hospital. Interviews from the doctors described the injuries as something they had never seen before. Matthew remained in the hospital in a coma for 4 days before being pronounced dead on October 12th.
Act 2 begins with Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson being charged with assaulting Matthew Shepard. Their arraignment is described by townspeople using the actual details from Shepard's death. Characters Catherine Connolly and John Peacock discuss the safety and the upbringing of children in Laramie, confused how something like this could have happened.
Matthew Shepard's funeral takes place during a snowstorm while messages of anti-gay hate are spread by protesters and pastors. Both McKinney and Henderson are charged with first-degree murder. In the end, the townspeople discuss the year-long trial and how glad they are to have it behind them. And their departure, they can see the sparkling lights of Laramie, Wyoming. To say the least, reading this play about a tragic story of the loss of a young man was very hard to get through. I understood the importance of telling the story and the impact it has had in creating a necessary dialogue in our country. I just found myself having to stop every once in a while to take a breather because of how heavy it was set on me.
With this play, I found myself feeling guilty for reading such a horribly painful and hurtful story as entertainment. I had to put the play down a couple times and just realized that the play was made to bring awareness to what happened, and not to glorify the situation that Matthew Shepard was put in.
The Laramie project first premiered at the Denver Center Theater Company on February 26, 2000. It was transferred to the Union Square Theater in New York City from May 18th of 2000 through September 2nd. It was also performed in Laramie at the University of Wyoming in 2000 for 5 performances.
The theater company from New York that visited Laramie were surprised when they saw a herd of buffalo on the fields. The image of the herd impressed the theater company because they had never seen that before. The people living in Laramie were living in a rural area, a place subjected to old rules and customs, and were less inclined to adapt to a new way of living.
Another very significant image was the fence where Matthew was found on the outskirts of town. The spot shows a view of the city lights, the stars, and the landscape. After Matthew died, the fence became a site where people go to focus on their grief, the hatred that led to the crime, and the town's recovery. The fence is referred throughout the play as both a site of violence and redemption.
The characters in the play refer to the natural beauty surrounding the town of Laramie and express their love for the stars in the Laramie night sky, which are extremely vibrant. Dennis Shepard says he is glad the stars were the last thing Matthew Shepard saw and hopes they made him feel less alone that night.